can be worth it early, like very early on the Legacy of the Void, but only if it's like you have to be a bit lucky because you can like practice there 1 month in like one patch, and then you go to a big tournament and there's still that one patch.
Yeah.
So you learn the like fucking Korean abusive shit build order that nobody can defend. Then you win that tournament and then they patch that shit. But if you're unlucky, then you like you play,
Patch
and then
break.
it's like you're there for 1 week, and then they patch the game, and then you have to go to the tournament, and then it's like you have nothing. Like it seems kind of dumb to go to, in my opinion.
Like right now, PvZ, I feel like Sky Toss by far is the best strategy to go. But I feel like eventually shit's gonna change. So I'm not even sure if I should be practicing it super thoroughly. Because I feel like right now, Sky Toss is the best thing to go. But
You mean carriers, right?
yeah, but I don't really think like you can do that forever, you know? They're not just gonna be like we're not gonna be playing Legacy of the Void for the next 2 or 3 years and like that's just the standard shit that you go every single game and they never patch it or change anything. So it's like you gotta like kind of measure yourself as a player. It was like fucking Zerg players for the longest time. I can't remember what change was it. It was like something with like it was a swarm host change. It was like they were changing swarm host to like the flying shit or whatever, right? And they announced it like 2 weeks, maybe even a month before it came out. Like, we are going to do this change. Blizzard's like, this is happening, and it's happening on this day. And Zerg players just kept going Turtle Swarm Host for like that whole huge period of time, like a month, right? And then like a tournament happens like a few days after the change, and they're like, this is fucking bullshit. I can't even play Swarm Host anymore. And they're like, no shit! We announced that, like, it was, we told you it was gonna change. Why did you practice Turtle Swarm Host style for like a month? And
Welcome back, Beastie.
Yeah, welcome back, Beastie. And I was like, these
you.
pro players are retarded.
Well,
I'm so aggravated. Like if they said, we're removing Blink from the game, like, completely in 2 weeks, I would stop going fucking Blink, because it's gonna be removed. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, you know they buffed the carrier again, right? In patch 3.0.
Did they?
Really?
Yeah, they talked about when you attack something with the carrier, and then you make a new target, the carrier, the interceptors will not for a second go back towards the carrier before attacking the new target. Now they will switch properly.
Oh, so they don't have to come back.
Well, I don't think it was like, I think we tested it tomorrow. I don't think it goes back to the carrier, but sometimes it would bug and stuff, right? So this should fix it, so that, I guess that's a buff, right? So, woohoo, carriers, yeah, more carriers.
Yeah, I also think like a unit like carrier, like that unit
Oh, it's
alone,
already
it feels like
right.
we're just, it's like changing, that unit alone is changing the way PvP works and PvC, and it just feels like that unit is kind of dumb. Just, that's not fun. Like, you can look at the games and it's like, that's not fun. That's gonna get nerfed. So it's like, alright, should I be like doing carriers or what? So it's like I totally understand where hack is coming from. Yeah,
How
like
would you guys nerf the
shit is
carrier?
gonna get nerfed and so on.
How would you guys nerf the carrier, if I may ask that question? Or change
don't
it?
Why would you just nerf it?
do you think it's just too strong?
Yeah.
Why?
In my opinion, I think the carriers are too tanky. Like, in many situations, I think when the carrier is losing, it's because it loses the interceptors, right? It's not like you actually lose the carriers. But
Yeah.
what if a nerf to the
It's like
carrier-
Hydras kill the interceptors, or Marines kill the interceptors, or Archons or
that-
something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm actually thinking it might be going too far, but at least for beginning, you could like remove like 100 HP or something from the carrier. So then it becomes like pretty, soft considering how big it is and the type of unit it is. You could go further and like make interceptors free.
That's
I
not
don't
I
a
mean,
nerf.
you can still kill the interceptors, right? That's right.
I don't think that's a nerf though.
Yeah, carriers are very, very weird.
I mean,
like the design
I guess
that
we
they're
could
at
make
right
them
now.
twice as fast.
The problem is that in StarCraft 2, like in StarCraft 1, you always went mech against Protoss, right? And then like in very special games, like somehow like sometimes the Terran players like in the weird like early stages where Boxer played, and he'd switch to like Marines and medics, and then that would be a counter to the carrier because they would kill all the interceptors. The problem with StarCraft 2 is that's natural. for Zerg when they go Hydras, and
All
it's
right.
natural for Terran because they just always go Bio, so you can't go Carriers PvT. But there needs to be something. I think just like a straight up health nerf to Carriers, because then it makes it more fun too, because you positionally have to like guard the Carriers with some other units as well, and then you have to be like more careful. It can't just be like, okay, I'm just gonna fucking fly this shit over there and kill him.
When I said go further, I didn't mean that removing cost and interceptors would be the actual nerf. Of course, it's not a nerf. But I'm thinking you could go further with the health nerf, or you could, like, I know the problem with interceptors removing damage is, of course, upgrade scaling and whatnot. I suppose you could increase the attack period, right? If you want to do a damage nerf. I think you could do a bit of both, a slightly increase in damage period and then a health nerf, and perhaps make interceptors free. But of course, just a straight up health nerf, without doing anything else, I think that's fine too.
Like interceptors, you can't make them free. Then we have like they swarm host all over again. Like you don't want free units in the game.
That's
really.
just the problem, because that would be a bigger problem because of the unloadability. You just walk around, unload shit, recall, unload shit, recall,
exactly.
unload shit,
Like,
recall.
Oh yeah, right. So you would
There's
have
no
to
reason
remove
for that.
that spell as well, of course, or make that cost money, or make that spell cost money. Like I think it did that in the beginning, right? That spell actually cost money, right? Wasn't that true in the beginning stages of the beta?
I have no idea.
Or was it just because you lost the interceptor? That was probably what they meant with the cost. Right, so you wouldn't like the spell, of course, right? But I'm not a particularly a fan of that spell, but of course I can see why it's cool to have, you know, the recall and stuff. By the way, I played a game recently. Have you tried using the ghost ability and then recall, and then there's still the ghosts? So you recall your depths and then they teleport on the other side of the map. Have you tried that? That's kind of fun.
Oh,
Anyway, yeah, that was interesting. I'm not sure it's good though, but it was a fun fact, right? Anyway, yeah, I think with the spell and stuff, you obviously can't make interceptors free. But with that being said, my problem is just to beat carriers. I always feel as long as interceptors they cost money, you can't nerf the carrier itself so much that it's more incentive or attractive to kill the carrier rather than interceptors. Because otherwise, you know, then they have two options. Then you can splash damage and random damage, whatever, kills interceptors and the carriers themselves as well, right? Like what I mean is, currently it's obviously the opposite. You almost always win by killing the interceptors. And if you like go for the carriers with a bunch of Hydralisk or whatever unit, like it's usually gonna be an uphill battle rather than having a lot of splash damage to kill the carriers.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, so you get the options when when you approach carrier, like you can get Archons for splash damage, kill the interceptors, or you can get Stalkers to jump on top of the carriers, kill them. Same with Vikings versus Liberator, or like
I don't
whatever.
like that you take everything and just kill the carrier. There should be like reasons to do both, right?
Yeah, like
Okay,
you should be able to approach it in different ways. Like the carriers, if it had less HP, you would have more incentive to like. If you want to go with the Stalker approach, you can like maybe do that. If you want to kill the Interceptors, you can do that. But right now it's like, okay, if you have Stalkers, they're like, fuck you, they can't kill Interceptors, so that doesn't
They
work.
can't kill carriers either, basically.
Okay, so from Terran point of view, and I know Zerg share this as well, so Carrier High Templar against Terran is good, but the thing is Terran can kill the Protoss a lot easier before that than the Zerg can. I think the Carriers are imbalanced in PvZ more than anything. So I don't agree that their health should be nerfed. The reason for that is you actually never want to go for the Carrier, because the Protoss is going to have High Templars. And the problem is, units that attack air from Terran are the Marines and then Hydras from the Zerg. So if you move closer, you're gonna get stormed to shit.
Nothing changes.
I don't even think PvZ. It's not. You don't even have High Templars. The only reason you see High Templars in PvT is because carriers are completely unviable in PvT. Like there is no situation I would ever get a carrier PvT going up against Bio. Maybe if they went mech. But Marines kill interceptors so quickly that it's completely pointless. So what I would like to see is the same line of thought: nerf the carrier's body and maybe buff the interceptor's health. And then that way it's like I like the choice that if you can get on top of the carrier, it's like a big reward and you can kill it. And if not, then you have to fight against the interceptors, and there needs to be like a conscious choice of those two things. Because in Brood War, it was always way better to target the carrier than try to fight the interceptors.
That's an interesting thought, actually, because now that interceptors they do cost money, they could never become a swarm host, in theory, right? I mean, so
or at least you have to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the carrier with the long range and how it works. I think it's interesting that you could actually make it a weak unit. I don't think Blizzard would buy that, and aesthetically, because the carrier is like boom, boof, big, and all of that stuff, right? But like I would see it per cost be even more squishy or as squishy as a Void Ray, for example, right? And then function with like slightly stronger interceptors, maybe 100 HP in total, including shields instead of 80, for example. That's probably 2 more shots from a hide risk. That's a reasonable buff for whatever nerf you're gonna do to the body, right? I think that's an interesting thought. But I also think, I mean, I do think Beastie has a point, because the problem with the carrier range is that what goes in to kill the storms. Now,
it's like an all-in.
I do not necessarily think that carriers, they have to be that completely unbeatable. Like, I've seen Queen Spores or other kind of Spore Crawler playstyles. I think it depends a lot on when you go carriers. Like, if you go for a 3-base instant carrier build, Zerg scouts it right away. I think Zerg has options to play towards the game and set up like a huge infrastructure with spores and stuff. And these spores, they take a lot of time to kill, and they will randomly kill spores. And actually, if you get into this passive game, I think Zerg is actually favored in late game if they get to use the full force of their economy and static defenses. And I think that's pretty indiscussable. If it's realistically true that carriers, they are too strong in PvC, it would not be because that Zerg has no options. It would simply be because of the fact that you can rust it so fast, or that you don't have answers to High Templars, because High Templars would be easier to get as an answer to, Corruptors and Hydralisk, which are very vulnerable to storms. Yeah, like the only other option I can think about is just an actual damage nerf to the carrier, since the strength of the carrier is, DPS, right? So you can like increase the delay in attack period or something. But honestly, to me, the problem with the carrier is just either it completely shreds everything because interceptors don't get killed, or they're extremely bad, like Hawk could picture in TVP when Marines just kill all the interceptors. So if you could somehow make the interceptors more valuable, not dying so much, but leaving the carrier more valuable, less valuable, and die more often, I think that could reduce this gap of carrier trading, the carrier trading mechanic, where it either kills everything or it does nothing, right? Can you like see something along those lines? That's what we want to see with the unit, or
Yeah, no, I don't think that would solve the issue.
so what would you do with the carrier though?
I would just nerf its HP. I don't think like a unit like carrier should just counter Marines just like that. I think Marine is the counter to the carrier, because you have the Marines to kill the interceptors. I think that's fine. That's how it should be. But then you add a High Templar and it's different. But it becomes a little bit dumb when the carrier has like this new fancy AI in Legacy of the Void, where it can kite everything, it can move while attacking, it can release interceptor, it has crazy range.
We gotta remember,
but then it also has a huge body, so that's like I would just nerf the body, because you have like this crazy mobility of the carrier now that you didn't have before.
We gotta remember though, the carrier isn't like something easy to get to. It's like literally the last tech in the Protoss arsenal. So it's not like this unit is just coming out of nowhere, and then even then it's being crushed, or it can be countered by a tier 1 unit, the Marine. So it's not like completely unreasonable, to be honest, in my eyes. Like if you can get, like if anything, it's a design issue as far as if you can go from literally nothing to carrier immediately, which is what I've been doing in a lot of my games, is like literally I have 2 or 3 units and then I just rush carrier, period, and then that's it, and then I'm at the carrier, and then I just keep massing carriers. Like, I don't see a situation right now, in the current state that the game's at, that I would prefer to have a High Templar, or 2 High Templar, or even 3 High Templar to 1 more carrier. Like, I'm spending all my gas on carriers. Why switch and get high Templars when I can just make more carriers.
Right, and you're making more carriers to reduce the risk of losing all your interceptors, because you actually want to make more interceptors than you're losing, right? Otherwise,
Yeah, and then the
Right, that makes
interceptors
sense.
are the mineral dump, so you don't
Right.
like. There's no point in making adepts or zealots because that's where all the mineral dump's coming from. And then
Right.
you're literally at. It's like if you could rush BCs and then just keep massing BCs the whole game. Why would you ever switch to anything else? Like literally, that's all you want. That's all you need. So I think that's more the problem right now is that Protoss, like at least in my games and the games that I've seen, is that it's like there's strategies based on purely, even in PvP, where you just literally rush to carriers and you just keep building carriers and that's it. Why
So
change?
do you think the problem is that you get them too fast, or that there's too big an incentive to just mass carriers and not go for anything else? Do you think it's fine
Incentive,
that
I
you
would
can rush
say.
them?
I think it's fine you can rush them unless they're going to like change everything because right now it's basically you're using the mothership core to play extremely greedy.
Right.
And that's the big thing.
Right.
PvT, that's not an issue right now. Carriers are not an issue in PvT at all in my eyes. I'm talking purely off of PvP, especially in a lesser degree PvZ. I feel like in PvZ, Zergs have a lot more options to damage
Right.
/ kill the Protoss. But in PvP, especially with the warp-in mechanic, it's hard sometimes to put pressure on another Protoss if they're just teching up straight. And you're not like there's just like if one player goes Robo, another player goes Stargate, and then they just get a couple or 3 carriers out. Even if you're massing things stalkers at that point, it's really tough.
You think carrier
Right.
is viable in PvP?
For sure.
It's like the best unit.
Really?
I
I don't know.
think
I've
the
seen you
carrier is
lose
hardest to counter
to.
that
I've seen you lose to Nighten, and you were trying to do carriers.
Who?
You.
Not
I mean, you can
since
lose
yesterday.
games.
I haven't played Night End since like before Red Bull, as far as I know.
Oh well. I mean, okay. I think you're right. All right. Are we settled on the carrier, or does everyone agree?
Well, I don't think not everybody agrees, but at this point, it's like it doesn't even matter to us. Like it depends what Blizzard's gonna do. I agree. At some point, something's gonna happen to the carrier because there's too many strong strategies solely based off of rushing carrier at this point. So something has to happen. They're not just gonna let that be the win condition for Protoss in like a large majority of the games, in my opinion. It's just
Okay,
stupid.
so just one thing. Okay, so mass BCs against Zerg are probably unbeatable as well. But the thing is, it's not a problem in TVZ because you cannot just rush them. Like, you cannot just, I want to make 5 siege tanks and just wait and miss BCs because you're going to die. So I think, for example, if Mothership Core or Pylon Overcharge would get nerfed, then the Protoss would not be able to just rush carriers. Like, you would have to actually play the mid game. And then, again, in the late game, the Protoss could mass carriers, but just like any game, if the Protoss gets to that stage where they can mass carriers and do whatever they want, like, they're gonna beat you. Just like Terran would beat Zerg if the Zerg lets them. So I actually think the problem in carrier is more that the Protoss is untouchable by Zerg early game, more or less, because of the Mothership Core. So
I don't think Protoss is untouchable versus Zerg. I think
not
it's,
like untouchable literally, but if you can rush carriers, like, I mean,
I don't think PvZ mass carriers are such a problem. I think PvP it's even a bigger issue than PvZ.
Yeah, I agree. PvP is the worst. Carriers are worst in PvP. Like, I've played so many games going ground where the carrier he expands before I do. Like, to me that just rings a bell. That's something doesn't make sense. And he's totally fine. And you have like PvP, it's a bit more static because of the pylons, right? And no sentries. Get lucky with scouting. Like the reaction you would have to make with Blinkstalkers and taking to Archons, Antlers, or Storm, although Storm sucks versus carriers, the taking difference is almost non-existent as opposed to carriers. Like, totally agree with Huck that the carriers, they're the worst for PvP. Like, they're too strong. The hardest to counter that magic for sure, in my opinion. Yeah.
So would it be easier to deal in PvP if the pylon was weaker?
Absolutely, but then I think TvP would be extremely hard to play, considering that, I mean, if you could reduce the pylon overcharge by 2 seconds, I mean,
No,
that would be fine.
it's not the duration, it's the damage. It's the cost. Like 25 for 30 damage every 0.9 seconds is too much.
I think that's needed for Protoss. I'm not sure if Hawk agrees with that. I think with the current Adept nerf for the early game, if you had the old Adept, considering the old Adept early game strength, now I know that there was problems with TVP Warp Prison, but then I think it was reasonable that the Pylon Overcharge thing was nerfed. But it's just a fact to me that Zealots and Stalkers, they don't really provide any substantial early game defense that the Adept does because of the extreme high plus light damage, right? I don't think I would even suggest nerfing the Pylon Overcharge. If anything, it's too weak for Protoss early game defense. Like, it's maybe it's not too weak, but it's yeah. I
mean,
don't think that's
Protoss
that's
is like, okay, so Terran didn't change at all as far as early aggression goes, and Protoss has had no problem defending in Heart of the Swarm without the pylons. And the mothership core on the Nexus was way weaker than the pylon was.
Right,
and
right.
Protoss was just fine.
There's a difference though. You can't rush Colossus anymore.
Yeah.
How does the Swarm have the ability
Yes,
to
you
rush
can.
Colossus?
Colossus suck in Legacy.
Okay, well, yesterday I played a tourney, so I expected the Protoss to do, you know, what Protoss does, like they did so far. I played against Showtime, which did Blink Stalker Colossus. He
Right,
kept
right.
dancing around and tech to Tempest, and he fucking crushed me. So
What'd you do?
I try to go
if you look
Liberators,
at
but every time I see Jup, he moves away and goes to
so
the other
make
side.
Vikings. If it's exactly the same except Colossus are worse. It's the same game except Colossus are
That, to me, it's
statistically
just,
worse.
yeah.
So you could play exactly like Heart of the Swarm and do even better.
He's just gonna make disruptors the moment he sees Vikings.
Then you can make Liberators. Like that's the switch here. Like
But
if he's going pure
switching to Tempests already,
He's-
like
if he's going pure Stalker, pure Colossus, it's the exact same
Guys,
unit-wise
what I'm
as Heart of the
thinking here
Swarm.
is that you
no?
have to take such an early third base for Protoss. What about Maro style mass medevac? Like if you're going Colossus, Blinkstalker, I mean, you have the Pylon Overcharge thing, and I'm not sure it's better versus mass drops. I mean, Maro has talked about
Yes,
it.
it
You
is.
make a drop, click the pylon is dead, and you also have to get the multi-cost out. Like what I'm picturing is the biggest threat to a Colossus transition, rather than massing Adepts or rushing Storm or having Phoenixes or whatever, or more Stalkers to deal with it or go aggressive. All of these things, it's too difficult to defend your bases. That's what I picture. Sure, you can argue that there's an interaction in the mid game and stuff, and I'm not going to go too in depth with that. All I'm saying is a +3 Colossus in Legacy of the Void is the same as a +0 Colossus in Heart of the Swarm, right? And considering the armor upgrades and all of these things that they scale into the late game, and I think if Terran gets +3/+3 and you get Liberators, which also supports or deals with Colossus almost as well as Vikings in a sense, considering what they can do to other ground units as well. What a Disruptor's gonna do? I mean, okay, you may have a point, right? But I don't think going Colossus is gonna help you in the very early game. Like by the point that you're gonna take a third, like I just think it's gonna be too weak. By the first time you get the first 3 or 4 Colossus or something, I think you're gonna need a lot to be safe. I'm not sure if Terran's yeah.
so. I played against him. He beat me 2-0. That's like the first time in Legacy that I felt, wow, Protoss actually outplayed me. Like he didn't mass Adepts and like fucking crush me. He actually outplayed me. Like he used Blink Stalkers and Colossus. Every time I siege Liberators, he moved away. I unsieged. He blinked in, killed the Liberator, used the Colossus to push back the bio, moved back.
Right.
He did that throughout the whole game while taking to whatever they're called, Tempests.
Okay.
The moment, like first of all, he has like a GM account with 70 wins, 15 losses, so I don't think that playstyle is unplayable because he's obviously doing pretty well with it. He beats other Terrans with it, and like he's a smart player. He's not gonna be like, oh, he has Vikings, I'll just mass Tempest and Colossus.
But I don't understand. It's the same exact matchup as Heart of the Swarm, and Colossus are worse. So why wouldn't you make Vikings?
Whoever made Vikings in HOTS against Protoss? Unless you want to pull the SCVs.
Okay.
Everybody made Vikings against
I don't
Protoss
think-
and HOTS.
I don't think many Terrans has played the medevac style versus Protoss. That's
In
why
theory,
I'm-
everyone did.
Like,
The only
but-
Terran, no, the
What?
only
Are
Terran
you
that played
kidding me?
was Fenrir.
Terrans made
Yeah.
Vikings against Colossus all the fucking time. How are you even saying this?
No, I think there's a point that basically Kitty has. Like Terrans were mostly winning with, like if you want to win against Protoss and Heart of the Swarm, you do like an SCV pull with Vikings,
With Vikings,
or you do
mass
like
drop.
yeah, or you do mass drops. It's not like back and forth on the map. We just
Right.
buy a Viking against Blinkstalker Colossus like that.
But
Armies
Vikings
is
were a
slightly
regular
strong.
thing in the matchup since
Yeah,
like forever.
yeah, it was. But
And then
you gotta
even
keep
most recently with Maru, then medevac heavy style plays got more and more popular. But saying that Vikings were not used in Heart of the Swarm against Colossus is retarded.
Yeah, but
They are
it's
not
okay.
used
But what
unless
you
you
need
have
to keep,
people.
okay, so look at this way. So you have the new photon overcharge, which is stronger than the last one against like mass drops, and then you have the photon overcharge against SCV pulse, which is also stronger. So you have those two things which were huge in PvT. Like your win condition of mass dropping has been nerfed a lot, and and the SCV pull. So then. Like, you can't just say that it's the exact same matchup. Like, even though those units are the same, the game will play out differently. Yeah, like, do you
Okay.
understand what I'm talking about? Like,
The game is not the same, but the units match, like the units are the same, and the Colossus is significantly worse than the Heart of Swarm version.
yeah,
So
but
I'm
like,
saying that it's a problem. Like if you go Liberators versus Colossus and Stalkers, it makes sense that you're losing games against him because he's like just countering you, and you're refusing to adapt at all, and you just continue to go Liberators.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
will make
but
I'm not
Vikings.
saying
He
that like
will, okay, I
okay,
will make Vikings. He will make disruptors.
and then you can make Liberators. That's how
And then
StarCraft
he
2
makes
works. You have
Tempest. Then he
and
makes
then you
Tempest.
and then if
Then
he
I'm
makes
dead.
Tempest and he can get to that point, then you should lose. Like that's how StarCraft 2 works. He makes a unit, you counter him, he counters you. This is an RTS. This is how the
That's
game
not
is
how the
played.
game should work. Like,
He
oh,
makes High
your previous
Templars, you
late
should
game
make
should deserve.
Ghosts. He makes Roaches, you should make Marauders. You know, like those kind of things. That's a regular thing in StarCraft 2 since the
Wait,
beginning
so
of the
can I
game.
ask you a question?
Yes.
So in Wings of Liberty, if the Zerg got to Brutal or Infestor, they deserve to win, right?
That is like a completely different thing.
That's what you just said. If the Zerg counters your pushes and it gets to Brutal or Infestor, it's fine.
Infestors were the problem in that matchup, and Infestors were like a tier 2 unit. That was the problem in that matchup. Tempests are literally the last thing. If you have mass BCs against Zerg, as you said before, you should win that game. No? Is that not what you said earlier?
Yes, you will, not should. Like, I'm not saying no, but design is excellent. You should win always.
You
I'm saying,
will.
like, should,
Okay,
you
so
will.
you will. If he gets to Mass Tempest, Colossus, High Templar, Disruptor, he should win. He will win. That's the situation you're painting to me. Is that he gets Disruptor, High Templars, Tempest, Colossus. That's the theoretical situation that you painted for me.
Okay, well,
I don't think
you
it's
you
relevant
play
to talk
completely different play style from him. Like,
Yes.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I just want to go out and say, like, I think Colossus definitely has a place in the game still. To say like the unit is useless, I
It's
don't
not that.
really agree with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's fair to say Colossus isn't dead. Did this? No, okay, you guys are still alive.
I mean, is the Colossus dead? I mean, to me, it's all about the early game openers. Like, if you go Colossus every single game, if that's your plan to go Colossus every single game, I think the Terran counter would make that unit dead if that's the plan. But since you can go
Yeah,
for
but
different
what's your
things, that's
counter?
not gonna
What's your
happen.
counter, Theo?
I'm not even gonna talk about the Viking, Liberator, Disruptor, and Colossus interaction. I don't really think that matters. I thought about it when Beasticute described it, and I think it's true. You can dodge the Liberators, and you can buy time for Tempest and win the game. I think in that situation, I think Colossus can work. Sure. I thought about it, and I think Beasticute might be right. Where I think there's two things that are not correct. One is that the new Photon Overcharge is better versus Medivac Tops. I don't think that's true. Pylons, they get destroyed, and they also give supply and give gateways, and they die relatively easily. And if you consider the HP that the Nexus has and the duration of that overcharge, sure, you can fire up 100 energy worth of overcharges and you do 120 damage, but that's also considering Terran can do, damage on multiple locations, especially in Legacy of the Void where we have to expand more. The problem I have for the new Colossus is, if you compare it to Heart of the Swarm, it was extremely difficult to defend drops with the Colossus, or even just like Medivac, Marauder, Marine, with or without Widow Mines, it was extremely difficult, and it was even difficult to an extent just sitting on 2 bases for a little bit, but especially if you took an early third. I think in Legacy of the Void, Protoss is more forced because of the ground disadvantage as opposed to what was in Heart of the Swarm when you could go with a stronger Colossus versus Liberators. Now, that's still true, what Beastie says. You can be Showtime and you can outplay and have a better mid-game, but he's probably taking a very early third as opposed to the third he's normally taking in Heart of the Swarm, probably even going single or double upgrades beforehand. I don't think that the new Colossus is going to be a viable solution against a mass mid-rank threat with the nerf damage that Protoss has to expand even more than in Heart of the Swarm, and in my opinion, versus multi-pronged aggression, nerfed overcharge, and nerfed the depths as well, in theory, because it's probably going to be difficult to go for rush at depths and use those guys to support, you have to go blink, right? So, in my opinion, those things add up to Colossus being not viable in a matchup where Protoss, they want to make Colossus work. Of course, one game you go Stargate into Storm, Blinkstalker, Disruptor, or just Blinkstalker, Disruptor, whatever, right? And the other game you go Colossus. So it's not like Terran is going for go mass Vedek drop and like try to play it like they did in Heart of the Swarm every single game. That's just my opinion. That's the reason why I think the Colossus is not a good solution, and that's despite that they could work in the mid game, as how Beastie described it. Because I think it becomes problematic much earlier than that for Protoss. That's my opinion.
Okay, so as far as the Mothership core goes, so for example, Terraform, they put pylons on the edge of the bases, like 7 pylons. Right. And then if they see a drop, they just overcharge, you can't drop. In HOTS, if they don't have units, the Nexus is dead.
Well, the overcharge lasts for 10 seconds. If you overcharge 7 pylons, I mean, I would probably be happy if I see that as a Terran and I react in time. And the other thing is he needs his Mothership code there, right?
He overcharges 3 pylons. He sees the units are there. He warps like 6 stalkers. You cannot go back in.
I don't see a problem with that, though.
I think the overcharge.
No, I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm saying like overcharge is stronger. It's not worse.
I don't know.
I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm not saying like it's like.
I don't even necessarily think it's stronger. Damage-wise, it's stronger, and yes, you can use it on more things, but it's just completely different. Where before it was like consistent damage and it defended more ground, and now it's not as consistent and it does more damage. So it's like high reward, high risk.
How much damage did it do in HOTS?
Cannon?
I think it's 20.
Yeah, 20% nerf.
It did 20 damage, I think.
Yeah, it did same as Cannon.
Yeah. So that's 20.
No.
Okay, I agree, Beastie. If you have a situation, the pulse course position.
25 damage. It two-shotted the SCV scout, right? Like,
Photon overcharge.
Wait, no,
it two-shot Marine. Like that's why you got.
Yeah, it is
shield.
25. I think it's 25 too. Yeah, it's right.
Sure.
And 30 in Legacy, right? Yeah, I think that's true as well. I agree, Beastie, that if you have a situation, the Mothership core is in position. The overcharge. I'm not sure it has the same range as in Heart of the Swarm. I think it does, or the previous Photon overcharge. But you need the Mothership core.
It says 20 damage, by the way.
No, there's no way it was 25.
No.
It says 20. I just copied
When you
pasted.
drop, it doesn't even kill your units.
No, I'm talking
it kills
about
the Marines.
like in Heart of a Swarm, you would upgrade combat shield to get 3-shotted by photon overcharge.
It says 20 on the site on Liquipedia.
There's no way it's
that?
25.
Okay, right.
I'll link it.
Okay, I'm not sure. I don't feel it's necessarily relevant how much the old.
No.
Like
This is relevant, right?
We're gonna get to the bottom of this right
We're
now.
gonna talk about Heart of a Swarm. No, it's like the flash build, 3 max combat shield push.
Okay, the situation.
So,
The standpoint I'm making, Beastie, is I think Protoss has to expand earlier than in Heart of the Swarm. I just think they have to.
I mean,
And I can explain
well.
why, but if we assume they do, if we assume that Protoss has to expand earlier in Legacy as opposed to Heart of the Swarm, if we compare the matches to that, although maybe that's not the best thing to do, that means the Mothership core is more out of position when it comes to using Photon Overcharge, right? There's one note. Recall is 50 energy. So you can recall, you can throw down 6 overcharges and 6 pylons. That's assuming that the Terran would already have been doing the drop. I agree in the situation where the Mothership core is there to intercept an incoming drop. photon overcharge is extremely scary. I totally agree. But I think mostly that alone is compensated by the extra surface area you're gonna get as a Protoss player, especially considering the fact that when Terran goes for Marine Marauder Medivac, a Protoss is probably not, unless it's going for 2 base, 3 base all in, Heart of the Swarm style, he's probably not gonna attack. Let's just assume he's not gonna be attacking until he gets like what he wants, maybe Tempest or whatever, or unless he sees Liberators. So Terran would have the map control and the expanding value, and you have to expand more frequently. And by the point that Protoss has to take a 4th base, which could be argued in some situations as the 3rd base timing of Heart of the Swarm, I just picture the difficulty in defending multi-pronged aggression with Maro-like micro. And I'm trying to talk about this in a theoretical standpoint, where the Terran has extremely good micro multitasking, whereas the Colossus is going to do one more shot on Marines, I think, and certainly one more shot on Marauders. And the more spread up Protoss becomes, the less efficiency you get out of Colossus. So like, the best I can say is maybe you can somehow make it work, but I don't think it's stronger. That's definitely for certain. I don't think it's stronger than what
as
Terran
far
has
as the
to offer.
overcharge goes, as a Terran player, I'm not saying this is the Protoss or the Zerg or the Blizzard representative. As a Terran player, I would rather fight Heart of the Swarm overcharge that dealt 50 damage and cost 100 energy than deal with pylons that cost 25 and deal 30 damage. Like, at least when the Protoss overcharges, I know they committed, I need to wait and I need to go again. This way, 25 energy is so low, the Protosses have it all the time. This is just my personal opinion. I hate overcharged pylons. I think we talked about this on one of the shows. The statistics make no sense. 25 energy for 30 damage is, like, makes no sense.
But it's just 11 seconds, right?
Well, you're going to get your units there in 3 seconds, so 11 seconds I think is more than enough.
So you're assuming that you have done the drop and then there is pylons overcharging afterwards, right?
That's when you overcharge. Like, you don't overcharge as soon as
you don't
it's-
overcharge
like,
when they're like fully overloaded, and you don't overcharge when you see it as
Right.
an observer. You
like when
overcharge when they
when
commit.
he's on top of you, that's when you start overcharging.
Yeah, and you just fuck
right.
over the medevacs,
And you have
bring the units.
scans. You have scan. You can see the mothers, of course. That like it would have to be positioned like in perfect position. And the second point is, overcharge is sub range. It's not like you're just gonna have 5 pylons in range of all of your units. Like you can microwave. I mean, it could happen, and that would favor Protoss. But maybe it's just 1 pylon. Maybe it's just 2 pylons. That's 400 HP and shields. And if you have 3 medevacs, well, maybe you lose a Marine or 2 and maybe a Marauder, and then you kill the pylons, and he would have done a warp and whatever, right? With Colossus, I think that's a problem, because the Colossus does not benefit from the warping like the Adept does, and it doesn't benefit from early game upgrade strength that you have to charge and Adept. So this is why I don't make the same argument about the photon overcharge when it comes to playing other strategies than Colossus. But if you're committing Colossus and going heavy Colossus, that's when I make the arguments, and that's when I'm saying that the ground is not going to save you, the 2-second warp-in is not going to save you. And sure, you can have some circumstances with a lot of pylon shooting, and you can have circumstances where they're not. I agree that I understand what you're saying, okay, and I can feel the point you're making. And if you don't have a scan and you feel like it's a critical point, you have to do damage. Maybe the first push got caught off guard, or you were lucky or whatever, and then you have to do some damage. It's making Colossus, and let's just assume that they're actually pretty strong against Liberators combined with Blink, right? Okay, I can get into that situation, and you have to make a drop work, so you're hasting a little bit and you have to do damage, and boom, there's a Mothership Core, 4 pylons start shooting. I mean, it's definitely stronger than the old one. I'm not going to say that it's not, okay? But I don't think that's just a standard situation that you're going to get that much efficiency out of your pylons and relying on being there to just intercept the drop. And that's another thing, by the way. Terran still has the option, and that's my main point with this, to attack other locations, and even more so than in Heart of the Swarm. So I'm not saying that you should just completely focus on one point of attack. There's no way he's going to overcharge more than 1/3 of his front lines, right, or his bases. So drops are not even necessarily the thing you need to do. You can also just go attack, right, and do the pick up micro when you snipe a Colossus and stuff, as we've seen Maru do in Heart of the Swarm. All of these things are playable options, and And that's just the reason why I think Colossus is weak. If you don't go Colossus and if you abuse the early game strength, I mean, just the general strength of your gateway units in the mid game, then I think drops are weaker and you should rather go Liberators for sure. I mean, I'm not sure if you agree. Maybe you don't.
So this is my experience from my games. Like I said, I felt outplayed. I'm not saying it's overpowered.
Right.
What I'm saying is the Colossus is not a dead unit. The pylon overcharge is like a lot stronger than Heart of the Swarm for me, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Terrans agree with this.
Did you
as
play
far
against
as theory crafting? Sorry.
Did you play against a Colossus style thing, maybe Showtime, and you went for Medevac Drop style, or just Bio Harass style in general? Or did you go like...
You can't really, like, by the time you get to his base, he has, like, a Colossus and Blink Stalkers, and then he has Mothership Core, so I can't really push into them. So I went Liberators. He didn't, like, attack me. Like, he didn't warp and, was like, I'm gonna go, like, all in. He just poked. And poked and got a fourth base.
Yeah.
No, because his units are in front of my base.
Oh, he went in front of your base before you
no. Okay, so I moved out, but like there's Blink Stalkers and Colossus. Just like in Heart of the Swarm, I'm not gonna like fight that army, you're gonna die. And then in his main he had Mothership Core with like 5 pylons. And you can't drop there.
Yeah,
it was on Terraform.
Right. I do think he needs the pylons though.
He had the pylons in the main.
Yeah. What I mean is, if he has the Mothership Core in the main or the natural, and his units at his third or further into the map, I'm not exactly sure, but if that's the case, okay, I think the general Terran army should beat that, considering how weak the Colossus is. If he doesn't have Mothership Core.
Okay, so he had his whole army on one spot between the third and the natural.
And then the Mothership Core far away, or?
No, the Mothership Core was in the main the whole time. So if I try to drop and then attack with the other army, I'm attacking with half of the army. If I gather my armies, he's gonna see that because he has an observer.
Okay, maybe my memory is wrong, but if we imagine a similar situation in Heart of the Swarm and there's no overcharge, and that's the thing here, that he could defend without overcharge. I think that was extremely difficult in Heart of the Swarm, even with the previous Colossus, to defend. Just even heads-up attacks, and you even had force fields and stuff, which you probably don't now. In Legacy, with weaker Colossus and probably no sentries, and if your Mothership Core is not there to photon overcharge your pylons, maybe I'm bad or wrong or remembering something wrongly from Heart of the Swarm. I think I would die.
I mean, this is
like,
just...
like what you guys are forgetting is that, like, Protoss, I think they can get, like, more economy in early game. Like, we don't see Terran doing, like, Reaper expand. Like, I barely see that. I don't see 14cc. What I do see from Protoss, though, is, like, even quicker third bases than before. So Protoss, like, just starts from the game a little bit more ahead than in Heart of the Swarm. That's why I think it's okay that if Colossus is a little bit weaker, like, I still think Colossus, I don't think it's a dead unit. Like, I think it's a useful unit. As far as
we're not saying it's a dead unit. We're saying that it's not
you make
a
it sound
normal,
like
viable strategy. That it's going to be like a niche thing that maybe you go once or twice in a best of 7 series, but it's not your bread and butter. This is my normal macro game build.
I think it can be because
I disagree.
I mean, we're just gonna have to wait and play more with it. Like, my point was just I don't think Colossus is like a confirmed dead unit.
If you guys are right, we're going to see it for sure, right? Because Protoss played would start playing, especially Showtime and stuff. So we would see it and see how it works.
I even noticed that as a Terran myself, that they would deal very well with Liberators, the way you could poke around and stuff like that. As far as Photon Overcharge goes, when I think about it, like, there are situations where the old Photon Overcharge would be better. There are situations where the new one would be better. Like in early game, when I've just secured my third base, like, I don't have fucking pylons all over my main base. So then when the first double drop comes, they just nuke one pylon, and I don't have money for more pylons than that. And then the old Photon Overcharge would be better. But I think in general, like, as a general rule, if you have a Mothership Core in your main base, like if 4 medevacs comes in, like, mid game or mid to late game, like, this photon overcharge is gonna be better because as soon as you start unloading, then he is like throws photon overcharge from like 3 pylons or 4 pylons, whatever is in range, and he is fucking spawn kills your units coming out. There, it's just when I was a Terran, I just said, all right, I'm not gonna drop. Like it's not viable, and I think
Right,
this
yeah.
has a good point. Like I agree. The new photon overcharge, like overall, it's better. It's not better in every situation though, but for the
Right.
most part.
Okay, so just to the next point, yeah, sure. And then you have another medevac drop at another location. The Colossus is even weaker, and then you would trade better there than you would in Heart of the Swarm, while you would trade less. And we could assume that's even. The first point you made about the Colossus and earlier third bases for Protoss, I think the theory of getting a faster early third base and a weaker Colossus saying that's the thing we're going for here does make sense. But I also think that the earlier third base hurts Protoss in the way that you do not get the same comfortable Colossus count you would need approximately 2 per base for all medevac drops. That's 6 Colossus in my opinion. That's the number I would pick where I think, okay, you could defend a 4 medevac drop with 2 Colossus and Warpins, right, and Heart of the Swarm. So the Colossus is weaker, and I think that alone compensates the fact that Protoss can go for an earlier third base going for Colossus strategy. But at the same time, the third base in itself hurts Protoss with more surface area and more area of which Terran can hit with attacks and drops, right? But okay, like I kind of argue that I think that the Colossus is a dead unit if Terran starts playing this specific counter I'm thinking of. But that's very hypothetical and assuming that's what Terran is going to go for very often. Because if they're not, I could picture the Colossus being a not dead unit. Okay, so I'm not sure what that makes me think of the Colossus either dead or not. But if the case is this playstyle, I think I'm arguing for the dead Colossus case. Just so that's out. And I'm not sure there's much more we can talk about, but yeah.
Two things you're not considering. First of all, Marauder got nerfed. The damage got nerfed.
Right.
You're not considering that at all, and you cannot
Right.
mass Marines against Colossus.
Right.
Another thing is when in HOTS, when you arrive to the Protoss base, if they go Colossus with Blink or without, they have like a Colossus, 2-3 sentries, 2-3 zealots, and like maybe a few stalkers, right? So then the Protoss like actually has to have Mothership Core into position to the right base to overcharge. They need help. Right now, you arrive in the Protoss base. They have a Colossus, and he had like 12 Blink stalkers, and he didn't make sentries because the Colossus has 9 range. So he had 1 for the Guardian Shield, obviously, and then the Mothership Core covered the main. So if I wanted to fight, I had to engage his whole army with my army. And my army consisted of 2 medevacs and bio units, maximum 4 marauders, and that's like pushing it at that point in the game. And then he had a Colossus and 12 Blink Stalkers, and more Warpins and second Colossus.
It might have been necessary with the sentries in Heart of the Swarm. I'm not saying necessary, but at least in Legacy you can cut. You could even go 0 sentry, but obviously the Guardian Shield is worth it, right?
Yeah, Guardian Shield.
And that gives you faster blink and stuff. Oh, yeah, okay, maybe. And Marauders being nerfed, if that's equal to Colossus nerf, maybe not, but then Protoss can expand faster. Well, I don't know. I don't feel like right now, Colossus is the way to go. I just think there's better. Like, then I would go to the Hog side and say, I just think there's better ways to play. For sure.
All right. Well, I feel like we pretty much fucking talked about everything.
We're beating this horse. We are beating this horse with the giant bat, just all of us whacking at it.
All right. So, Beastie,
I think at the end of the day, when we said this last week, is that it's just going to take time. There's better players than all of us from Korea, so we really don't know, and we'll see.
Yes. But what I want to say is, Beastie, since we talked a lot about like a lot of stuff already, I still enjoyed your Facebook post. So I'm gonna give you 3. Basically, the Marauder. What was it? The Marauder, the Thor, and what was the last one that I enjoyed? The Bunkers. Those are the 3 you can cover from your blog. Because your blog is like fucking 3 hours long. So you get 3 items, and I picked them for you. So the Marauder, why does it suck, and what do you want changed?
Okay, so basically what I did is I posted a thing on my Facebook which I discussed every single Terran unit. Why I think it's good, why I think it's bad, and what I think should be changed. Not necessarily buff or nerf, just change. So I'm a Marauder. So when Legacy started, in HOTS there was never a problem with Marauders. It was never like, holy shit, Marauders are so strong, we need to nerf them. There was never an issue, like no players ever complained in TVP or TVZ or TVT. And that nerf to split the Marauder attack into two, to me, made absolutely no sense. I really don't know where it came from.
They were
Like,
tired
what
of
was the reason for it?
Marauders beating Ultralisk. They wanted Ultralisk to be more
Yes.
viable.
Which leads to my next point, which is they said that, but then they give Ultras 8 armor. So why would you nerf the Marauder and buff the unit that it was countering? Why not just do one thing? Like, why did you give Ultras armor as well?
I think
it was an
Blizzard's
overkill.
overall standpoint is they want to move away, and I'm not agreeing with them on this. I'm just saying from their like point of view of where they want to take the game is they want Terran to start using like mech and late game stuff more. But the problem is right now that those options aren't viable, and that's why it's not making sense, and hopefully we'll get there. But like they don't want the Marine to be able to counter so many things, and they don't want the Marauder, essentially both tier 1 units, to counter so much. You know, we have the Marine that can counter Interceptors, the Marauder can counter Ultralisks, and they want to move away from that. But obviously there's not a lot of other options at the moment.
Okay, so I agree with that. I think in the game, in StarCraft, there should not be any unit that hard counters another unit. There should be, like, what do we call, soft counters, that deals better with that unit than the other units do, but it doesn't counter it. You cannot just mass that one unit and, like, just destroy whatever race you're playing. So I would like to see, for example, Ultra armor stay on it, like stay with 8 armor, so Marines are like actually just bad against it, and then you need more Marauders and Ultra and Thors and Liberators to deal with Ultras. But now what happens is if the Zerg goes Ultras and you have Marine Marauder, it's like you have no units. They actually do not deal damage to Ultras. Marines deal 0.5 damage per shot, which is, I mean, nothing. Ultras have 500 health. And then the Marauder nerf as well doesn't help with that either. For example, if this was HOTS and then the Marauder shot the way it was, with 8 armor, you could see like it would affect the damage, obviously, because it's, you know, armor buffed. So it doesn't make sense to me to nerf the damage of the Marauder and then buff the unit that it's supposed to soft counter. Right. Another thing, the Zealots got buffed with the charge damage. And again, Marauders got nerfed. And the Marauders were the unit that didn't counter Zealots. It was like, I don't know how to explain. Both units counter each other because the Zealots were good against Marauders, but you could kite with Marauders against Zealots. And then Marauders had high HP, so, you know, it was like a micro battle in a way. I'll probably write a blog about Protoss and about the Zealot. But the point is, the change came out of nowhere. I don't think it's needed. The only thing against Zerg that Marauder is good at versus its roaches, and this nerf didn't change that at all. They're still good against roaches. The only thing that it screwed Terran over is it's like a counter against Protoss. Nerf against Protoss and then nerf against Ultras, which I think everyone knows are a bit too strong against Bio.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you so much, Beastie. Like that pissed me off so hard. Like you can't get like more hard counter in the game than like fucking Ultralisk against Bio. Like Ultralisk already like took a shit on Bio. It's not like you didn't build Ultralisk because Terran could just build like Marauders. Like no, we saw Ultras all the time. Terran tried to finish the game before Ultras, even in the Harder Swarm, because these units are fucking crazy. And it's like Marauders weren't like a super hard counter because you add a few Zerglings, you add maybe a Fungal, maybe a Blinding Cloud, and suddenly like it's a close fight. But then now you have in Legacy of the Void, like it's not even like it's no fun interaction. It's like Immortals, Hard Storm Immortals against Siege tanks. It just doesn't work. These units don't deal damage, and that's exactly how it is making Bio against fucking Ultralisk. And I agree, like combining those things, like splitting up the Marauder attack, along with adding another armor to Ultralisk, like Marauder is completely useless against this unit, and I just no reason at all for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing I just wanted to point out was the Zealot Marauder interaction. It's true, but I think there's more dynamic to TVP than the comparison. I think Beastie knows that as well. And with that being said, I still think it's reasonable to have the Marauder back, because I think we know the Liberator's gonna get some kind of ground damage nerf, whether we like it or not. I think the Marauder can go back, and I think it's okay that it does slightly more. It's more like more so versus Adepts than Zealots, but it's okay that it still does fine versus Zealots, and if that becomes a problem, then whatever. It's definitely because of the Ultra thing that it sounds like that it's just a no-brainer to go back to at least the old Marauder, so it doesn't do like 2 or 1 damage at almost a full Ultra Discard upgrades, and then instead does, well, if it's 8 upgrades, then it does maybe like depending on upgrades, like between 16 and 12, something like that. Like
so in Heart of the Swarm, Marauders were soft counter to the Ultras, but now I feel like Ultras are hard counter to Marines and then soft counters to Marauders, which to me make no sense. Like you cannot have a unit that just completely like destroys a core unit from the other race. And once they transition to it, if you're not prepared with whole another tech of Liberators or Thors, you're just dead. That's just the part that I don't like, and I don't think, even the Ultras don't matter. I don't think the Marauder, beside the Ultra, should get nerfed. I don't think it was too good. I don't think there was a problem with anything else. Like I said, with the Zealots, there's interaction where Marauders are really good against Zealots in the early game to mid game, but then the Zealots are good against Marauders in the mid to late game because of the charge. So I would really like to see the Marauders go back, and that's pretty much it.
What about the Thor? You said like you think the Thor is a dead unit and the Liberator is just better in every way.
Okay,
as far
so
as
Thor is just complete garbage. Thor was a dead unit in Heart of the Swarm as well. The only reason why you made Thor in Heart of the Swarm was because against Zerg you didn't have any anti-air other than Thor if you went mech. So, you made Thors. Or if you went bio, if the Zerg commits too much to Muta, you make a Thor and hope they, magic box and they lose the Mutas. Against Protoss it was always a dead unit. And right now the Thor overlaps with the Liberator. There's not a single situation, for example, if you play a TVZ and the Zerg goes Muta into Ultras, why would you ever make Thors to deal with Mutas and later Ultras when you can make Liberators that can chase Mutalisks a lot better, and then later they're going to deal even better against Ultras. And they're cheaper, and they're less supply, and you can react.
No one's going to disagree with you on that. I feel like Liberator's like a flying tank Thor. Why would you ever make...
Why would I actually disagree.
Ever make a siege tank worth?
Why do you disagree, Marl?
Okay, so I think if you're playing bio against a Mutaling Bane player, you're gonna have more success with Thors than with Liberators. However, there's like what you can do with the Liberator. Why it's so great is, okay, so the Thor is better straight up, like the stats. Even though they're really like damage, you have like a secondary role of the Thor, which is like tanking against Ling and Baneling, and it does a lot of that, whereas the Liberator doesn't do that. Another thing is that the Liberator can like die to Mutalisk. Thor doesn't really die to anything. So Thor is, like if you take cost for cost, what you want to add to an army, the Thor is going to perform better. But what you can do with the Liberator is that once you have enough medevacs, then you can start massing Liberators. So it becomes natural that you want to have Liberators in that army composition. I just want to say that I disagree with that you want 0 Thors against Lingbane Muta, because I don't think that's the case.
Okay. I personally don't make them. I think they're just too expensive. And even if I would make them, I would make maybe 1 to 2 while I stop making medevacs and then go Liberators. I just think they're not worth. They're immobile. They're not flying unit. They are worse against Ultras because they're ground, so the Ultras can kill them.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I have a question. Sorry, go on.
no, sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Blizzard, they